help. Fixed on it. Where's Ian? Oh, for crying out loud. Hey, come on, man. 3 minutes to the shoot. Let's go. Well, good thing you made it. I was worried you're not going to make it.
It was a bit of a rush at the last moment.
You applied too much makeup.
Oh, well, there's never too much.
And you don't have a makeup assistant. Because if you had a makeup
Advert
assistant...
is still in the local news agents.
Ah, I see. If you
no,
had
no
the
response
makeup,
to it yet.
If you had the makeup assistant, you know when to stop.
I need a lot of assistance in that regard.
Need someone to carry you all day and change your clothes and feed you, all that crap. Okay, well, tonight, at the request of many viewers, we are...
Too many to mention.
It was like requests here, there, everywhere. I mean, come on, you guys don't think about any other movie? I mean, just because the name is a little bit strange. Yes, it is Manhunter, Michael Mann's magnus opus, besides The Last of the Mohicans.
And Heat.
And Heat.
Intruder cut Charles Leeds' throat as he was rising, then shot Mrs. Leeds. Bullet entered right of her navel and lodged in her lumbar spine, but she died of strangulation.
Yeah, well, you have ice.
Yeah. Don't worry about it.
It's not here.
You having some? Oh, well done, Ian. I just spilled it.
Okay. Well, we can't get to Manhunter before speaking about the two movies that precede this one.
Pause. I've come undone. All right, carry on.
Okay. What we were actually going to speak about, this was going to be a double episode where we were going to do the Keep / Manhunter kind of retrospective, but we kind of thought that although the Keep has these moments, we could probably find ourselves into a wall there. We kind of prefer just to approach that movie for a little bit, but then speak mainly about Manhunter, because Manhunter really is a polished movie that deserves more attention, while The Keep still has has too much of that B-movie horror around it that maybe, I'm sure there's other guys out there that will probably do a whole episode on The Keep, but we prefer to keep ourselves to something that has a bit more to say, isn't it? But what do you think about The Keep in a very broad, quick analysis?
Damn it! Pause. I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, bring in another contest. I think it's better to get it out of the way.
I don't know the first thing to say about it at the moment.
No?
You say something, I don't know.
Well, The Keep has all the hallmarks of a Michael Mann movie. I mean, it's got the slow-mo, the electronic music, the lighting as replacement for drama, certain parts, very elegant, sometimes excessive use of lighting motifs. That's there in The Keep. Actually, it's got nice scenes in it. I mean, love-making scenes. It's pretty cool. Shot from above, as the camera glides above the actors, so they kind of bodies intermingling, literally becoming one, almost like twisted. And the back cover is actually used as texture. It's an interesting movie. It's a weird movie, isn't it?
I think all the dramatic elements are in place. I think it's hard to reach a full assessment of it because it was so massively edited by Paramount, who didn't really quite know what to do with it. And there was some bad luck in the post-production when the special effects supervisor died.
Yeah.
And they didn't really know how he intended to complete the effects. So they do seem a bit odd at the end, but I think overall the atmosphere is is very striking. It's a horror movie. The location is very stark, and yet again, I think it's one of the Mann trademarks that the whole tempo of the movie is set by the electronic score.
Yeah, very, very much video clippy, and it's very much a movie from the 80s.
Not in a pejorative sense.
Yes. Well, The Keep, for the ones that don't know it, is a vampire-esque kind of fantastic movie. You know, I mean, it looks very much like Krull and some other of the 80s movies that kind of lived in that kind of sword and sorcery kind of elements, although The Keep is actually set in Second World War, which makes it different. So
it makes it more interesting, I think. It's a sort of exploration of evil that, you know, starts out by demonstrating sort of the evil of the Nazis, and countering it with a greater evil that's being concealed in the Keep.
But Michael Mann's career starts a little bit before that, isn't it? I mean,
yes.
You like very much his first movie, Thief.
Which I've never seen.
You've never seen it.
But I'm very keen on it.
You've never seen it.
And again, it's impossible to bloody get hold of.
Just you and me now, sport. I'm gonna find you, goddammit.
Well, most of our viewers might remember Michael Mann mostly by a famous 80s TV series, Miami Vice.
Certainly those viewers who are the same generation.
If you are around 4 years old, yeah. And if you remember that, I mean, you probably will, even if you know the 90s movies of Michael Mann, and he has actually been a bit more proliferous in this last few years, last couple of decades. In the beginning of his career, he kind of he did his movies a little bit more spaced out, but really the hallmarks of Michael Mann for most individuals are the neon lit atmosphere, the obviously, like we already mentioned, the slow motion electronic music, but also very sophisticated environments.
Yeah.
Usually very polished kind of North American, California kind of areas. I mean, that's Miami Vice. That's in Manhunter. That's again in some of the in Heat as well. So Michael Mann is known for that. The question is, where did he actually started exercising that style? And obviously, you know, like we mentioned, part of it starts in The Keep. That's why it makes it a strange kind of a niche movie. But you know, again, just 3 years later, you really hits it home in Manhunter, because it's got everything that you really want from a Michael Mann movie, which it then takes even a few steps further by, for example, in Last of the Mohicans, the final sequence is also really beautifully orchestrated, violent climax, but is all done by music and slow motion as well. And obviously there might be some comparisons to some of the work that Ridley Scott does, just in terms of lighting and tempo of the scenes, but Ridley Scott does not use the same kind of stylization that Michael Mann does. Michael Mann is really interested in well, I would dare to say that Michael Mann is an iconoclast, because he really tries to merge both the actors, the set, and the photography and the sound into just one element, basically.
I think he's probably nobody films the city environment, the modern city environment as well, or depicts it as well as Mann does, both the beauty of it but also the hardness of it.
Intruder entered through kitchen sliding door, used a glass cutter anchored to a suction cup. His entry was skillful. All the prints are smooth gloves. Blonde hair, strong, size 12 shoe imprint. Blood AB positive, type from saliva on glass from licking the suction cup. Why didn't he care that he left saliva on the glass? It was hot out that night. So inside the house must have felt cool to him.
All right, so for anyone having not watched I was going to say the Keep Manhunter, weird name really, based on the novel Red Dragon, which later on was readapted, so remade again as Red Dragon with Edward Norton playing the part of William Peterson's part.
Yeah.
And with Anthony Hopkins reprising his Hannibal Lecter role, which in this movie is played by Brian Cox. Basically,
can I just quickly butt in there with a movie, a trivia information here, that actually Dante Spinotti, who's the DP on Manhunter, also is the DP on Red Dragon. Didn't know that, did you? You weren't interested either, were you?
No, I was really interested. Okay, so William Peterson plays Will Graham, which is kind of a profiler hired by the FBI to find these very tricky serial killers. He's the kind of man that has to put himself into the mind of the criminal, and with the evidence available on the crime scenes, try to determine what kind of person he is and where he might be. So the whole movie deals very much with an introspective state that the character has to go through to be able to achieve his goal. And really that's where Michael Mann centers his camera, centers the atmosphere. So there's many scenes where William Peterson is by himself, just monologuing, and added the soundtrack, you really have a very atmospheric film. The actual serial killer in Manhunter, which is codenamed the Tooth Fairy by the police force, is also a very interesting character. A very strange, almost muted man that in the subsequent versions is actually a little bit more folkloric, but it's a very toned down kind of individual. And basically the plot really just follows these characters through a couple of weeks, which is really the time frame that the FBI has between each killing, which happens at full moon, so every fortnight, to be able to catch this guy. So the movie is not high on action. There's no great dramatic scenes, but there is a lot of tension nonetheless, which is provided through the way obviously the script is built, which is by Michael Mann as well, and the way that the scenes are cut, and that's where the weight of Michael Mann as a director lies. Is really in the way he edits his movies and the way he varnishes everything with his melodic kind of stylization, basically, which is very nice, very smooth. I mean, I never actually fell asleep with a Michael Mann movie. Maybe some viewers might. I find Michael Mann movies very attractive and very soothing. Apart from the shootout in Heat, though. For you, what is your overall analysis of this movie?
I can't. This is terrible. Why am I here?
I'm sick of you crazy sons of bitches, Lecter. You got something to say it.
I want to help you. You'll be more comfortable if you relax with yourself. We don't invent our natures. They're issued to us along with our lungs and pancreas and everything else. Why fight it?
Fight what?
Do Did you really feel so depressed after you shot Mr. Garrett Jacob Hobbs to death? I didn't know you then, but I think you probably did. But it wasn't the act that got you down, was it? Didn't you really feel so bad because killing him felt so good? And why shouldn't it feel good? It must feel good to God. He does it all the time. God's terrific. He dropped a church roof on 34 of his worshippers last Wednesday night in Texas as they were groveling through a hymn to His Majesty. Don't you think that felt good?
Why does it feel good, Dr. Lecter?
It feels goodwill because God has power. And if one does what God does enough times, one will become as God is. God's a champ. He always stays ahead. He got 140 Filipinos in one plane crash last month. Remember that earthquake in Italy last spring?
Going back to the serial killer in Manhunter, so the Tooth Fairy,
Or Red Dragon.
or Red Dragon. Yes, because he does not like to be called Tooth Fairy. That's the nickname that the police has given him. But interesting enough, Michael Mann options not to shoot the serial killer in a danky, dark, and gruesome environment. No, his house is actually just like the beachfront house of William Peterson's character. It's actually a very spacious house with large windows that expose him quite clearly, and he works at a photo lab, and his walls are covered by very interesting, picturesque, full wall-to-wall posters, and is also very brightly colored, and it's also very interesting. Again, using the same grammar that Michael Mann seems to almost have created. He first starts shooting the scenes with his serial killer in blues and slightly more muted colors, but then as a love interest is brought in onto the scene, which happens to be a blind woman, then suddenly he starts irradiating the set with more pinkish and orangey and warmer colors. So again, this is part of the psychology behind of what Michael Mann is really trying to do. He almost he color codes his scenes, and he color codes his moments from the beginning to the end. I mean, obviously the opening shot of Michael Mann, he straight away shows you what you're up against. He starts filming from the sky down, so the sky turns into the water, and by the end of the shot, as the camera rests, you have sand filling up the bottom of the screen, and in the middle a dead tree trunk, a white dead tree trunk with one man on each side in opposing positions dialoguing. So this is obviously is a completely nonsensical arrangement of the actors, but is really there.
That's right. There actually seems to be almost a disconnect between sort of the beauty of the scene and the nature of the dialogue, the sort of almost clip nature of the dialogue.
Yeah, but that's exactly. I think that is the
and it's again a masterful use of style, and they introduce the element of basically the detective has come to try and encourage Will Graham to come back and work for them to help catch this killer. And as they play on his empathy for the victims of the murderer, we see just out of frame his wife and his boy coming into shot to sort of reinforce the psychological point that it's making. And there's a lovely shot as well later that's in the evening from the inside of the house looking out when again two people are sitting next to each other and you see a slightly reddy pinky sunset and fantastically beautiful.
And then picking up on that, and to reinforce the idea, that's what I believe is exactly the magic that Mann brings to his movies. That he almost arranges the choreography on the set, the position of the actors, in function of a certain emotion he's trying to play at the audience. And obviously then he arranges the whole scene with the right lighting and the right music and the right pacing. But
it's a pure cinematographic style, if I could even say that.
It's a very sophisticated, almost I would say advanced language, of cinema, and one that is really worth looking at it very closely. Sort of grammar that usually gets awards in film festivals in Europe, because again, I mean, every time there's a dialogue scene, he almost arranges the characters in this particular place in the shot that serves a purpose for whatever they're saying. Either they're in opposite sides, or if they're close together, but not actually facing each other.
Exactly.
There's a lot of interesting dynamics going on an actual shot of a Michael Mann movie.
You know who I am? I don't want to know who you are. According to you, I'm a sexual pervert. An animal, you said. You know who I am now?
Yes.
Do you feel privileged?
I'm very scared.
Open your eyes. Listen, as your reporter. Your job is to report, that's why you're here. And if you don't open your eyes, I'll staple your eyelids to your forehead. Well, here I am.
Again, I think that's a Mann technique in which, although physically we may not see an immediate psychological connection between the characters, we know it's going on there beneath the surface, and he's able to convey that. I mean, I think it's quite interesting with regard to the murderer, Red Dragon, because I probably should have mentioned before that there will be plot spoilers. But it's important to mention that we actually see who the killer is just after halfway through the movie. It's about with 50 minutes left of the movie to run. And as Lewis was saying, the lighting changes slightly for the killer because the film for some time almost gives the impression that there might be some form of redemption for the character, which is a remarkable thing because he is a horrendous killer.
Yes.
And there's a very powerful scene, I think you'll agree with it, probably occurs in the final third of the movie in which, as Lewis was saying, he's developed a sort of a romantic attachment to this colleague at work, that he takes her to a veterinary hospital to see and to touch a sedated tiger. And this isn't a falsified scene, I suspect.
No.
I mean, the actress Joan Allen actually does this, and it's an extremely powerful scene because all the power and menace and threat of the tiger is exposed there to the audience. And there's a clear parallel. Again, it's the psychological connection between him, the Tooth Fairy, and the tiger.
Yeah, that is another good thing he does in these particular movies, that the actual bad guy is never actually shot doing anything bad. We know he's a killer because he presents that to us. But yeah, he almost makes us want to have a certain degree of compassion towards him. He does shoot a guy point blank, but it's actually not seen in an horrific way. He does burn a journalist, but again, we don't see him doing that. We don't actually see him doing anything violent until the end, where he actually, right at the end, with climatic scene, he shoots a bunch of policemen. But really, I mean, you don't necessarily need to feel empathy towards him. But Michael Mann does not show the serial killer as a vile creature, although we know he is.
Well, it's an uncomfortable place to take the audience. I mean, we say sympathy for him. Well, yes, up to a point. At one point, and again, it's a good scene that William Peterson says, I'm sympathetic because towards what made him as a child into this brutal killer, but as an adult, I want him brought to justice and I want him killed.
Well, but that's exactly what Michael Mann is doing in this movie. The thoughts of the killer, which really is a guy that speaks very little and does not actually, apart from a couple of speeches he makes, which are quite cryptic, he doesn't really explain anything straight from his own mouth. So we have all the thinking of the killer's mind being done by the hero as he profiles the serial killer.
Which obviously has two effects. I mean, obviously there's the narrative point that it's drawing a connection between the killer and the psychology of the investigator, the profiler, but also it's a way of bringing the audience into understanding the psychology of the killer.
So it serves two purposes.
Yeah. Just to go back to The Keep, what I find striking about watching Manhunter, which is made in 1986, The Keep 1983, is that by 1986 Michael Mann's fully formed as a director. He's completely in charge of his skill, and I think this is seen very much right from the beginning of the film. And William Peterson, who plays Will Graham, is introduced as a character, and his use of location. He's a very visual director. He has clearly a very keen eye of how the look should be of the movie, how the shots are set up. But also there's sort of thematic elements which I find very striking in Michael Mann, in the way that he builds his tension against very clean, very pure locations, both physical ones, geographical ones, sort of the placidity and peacefulness of the beach house where Peterson and his wife and boy live, and the urban environment too, which again is something he picks up on in Heat, which probably I would say is his best film. And also that same sense of modernism and beauty in the physical environment. At the same time, as contrasted with scenes that are occasionally very frenetic, very loud, very busy. I mean, Mann is quite remarkable at showing the arrival of a helicopter or a convoy of police cars in an extremely thrilling way. And this is partly due to the cameraman, who's an Italian DP called Dante Spinotti, who is brought in. This is his first American movie, and he's Mann's a regular collaborator, as I believe is the editor Dov Hennig. And there's a very clear meeting of minds between Spinotti and Mann. And Spinotti mentions Mann's very clear ideas about how sets should be, how scenes should be filmed, but also how the sets should be arranged. Everything is very clearly set out. Spinotti particularly mentions the framing in a scene where William Peterson goes to interview the serial killer Hannibal Lecter, who in a way becomes sort of, as it were, the main character in the Thomas Harris novels, and the framing with the bars in the cell.
And the whole cell is white, basically.
Exactly. Again, very, very strong use of colour in Mann's movies, and particularly in Manhunter. The use of filters, the blues in the beach house that Peterson lives in, the clean white of the cell that Lecter's in, but also the house of the second victim of the Tooth Fairy. There's a very striking scene when Peterson first goes to the house and walks around it, and you sort of see the gruesome detail of the bedroom after the murder. And again, it's the contrast between that very pure, very very clean white and the blood that splattered over the walls.
And a very big hello to all our viewers and subscribers. Just a little side note before wrapping up this video. We try to make these things as entertaining as possible, and sometimes, or many times, we do need to and are compelled to include a few clips from the movies we discuss and do retrospectives on. Unfortunately, obviously, because all this is copyright owned by the movie creators and the production houses that own the movie copyrights, YouTube tends to kind of block our videos worldwide. This is obviously a little bit annoying, as a lot of times we have to re-edit and re-upload our videos. Even though the use of the set clips is in complete fair use, as the whole show is merely a review retrospective kind of thing, and a lot of the times the clips are actually transformative as we voice over many of them. Now, we will continue to do these videos as far as we can take them, but it's just to give you a heads up. Then one day, someday, we might be moving to a different platform that is not YouTube. We do have a couple of places in mind. Their reach is obviously not as big as YouTube, and at the moment, we won't be biting the hand that feeds us, but in the near future, we see how things will be going. One thing is for sure, we want to do these videos, we want you guys to watch them, but we don't want to be pressured every single time we put one up to the point of almost giving up with the edit and just throwing the whole thing out of the window. Well, in the meanwhile, just like the video, subscribe to the channel if you can, if you like, and see you again in the next movie talk.
This is an exploration of
Oh, fuck you, bitch. In the middle of it.